The Bethesda Green Speaker Series presents People, Culture, and Building a Team with Richard Boly.
Hello, my name is Richard Boly. I'm a former career diplomat, now working in the innovation in large organization space. I sit on the board of a number of organizations, including Bethesda Green, and also advise some startups, both locally and at the places in the U.S. and abroad. So Bethesda Green, we've relaunched the Incubator Accelerator program, and our goal is not just to capture the nuggets of insight from the people who come in and work with our startups for the startups that they're working with, but also for the greater Montgomery County community. We think that these nuggets really should be spread as broadly as possible. So being a founder of a startup is really tough. You need to both have the vision of what you want to achieve, even though you don't know what all the steps are to achieve that. You also need the self-awareness to know what of those steps are kind of beyond your reach, or maybe even beyond the reach of your current team. So for a founder to be successful, that founder needs to say, this is what I know and what I can do. This is what my team can do or what my team can learn to do. And here are the blind sides, or the blind spots where we need to fill in. And that you're both weaving this vision, which you're really not sure how you're going to be able to get to, as well as being able to take care of these existential decisions daily. I'd like to give a couple of examples of startup founders who have both failed, but maybe their company has succeeded. One is, this is way back in the day, there was an Osborne computer. Adam Osborne was the founder of Osborne Computer. This was way before even the PC came out. And at the time, Adam Osborne and his Osborne 1 computer had about a 30% market share. When IBM announced that they were going to start making these mini computers, or these personal computers as well. And so immediately the press beat a path to Adam Osborne's door and asked him what he was going to do. Now, if he had been an experienced startup, or if he had gotten out of the way, or he had had good training, he would have responded, I have 30%, we have 30%, IBM has none. Until that changes, we're not worried. Instead, what he said is, we will be out with the Osborne 2 before the end of the year. Unfortunately, he hadn't started building the Osborne 2 yet, and he had a huge warehouse full of Osborne 1s, of which nobody wanted to buy because they wanted to wait for the Osborne 2. Since he hadn't started the actual development and production of Osborne 2, he didn't have the income from the sales of Osborne 1s to fund that. So his company went in 3 years from a $0 to $200 million valuation to bankruptcy. So there was an example where if you would have brought in a professional CEO, stepped out of the way, let him take care of the public relations and be the face of the company, we may still be buying Osborne computers today. Another example is when you say Tesla and founder, people immediately think of Elon Musk. Actually, Elon Musk was not the founder of Tesla. He was the person who rescued Tesla. The founder was Martin Eberhard. Nobody knows Martin. But Martin took the idea of Tesla and went all the way through manufacturing of Tesla, got them out in the marketplace well before Elon Musk came into the picture. But Martin didn't have the big personality of Elon, and he didn't have the ability to raise the capital that Elon could. So, Martin Eberhard started and took Tesla into the marketplace, and yet nobody remembers his name. Dean Kamen, too, is famous for kind of being a solo. But in general, it's because there's, in addition to the yin and yang, there's just good days and bad days. And if you guys string together a series of bad days and you don't have anybody else to come in and say, come on, we can do it, it's hard. And as you know, as an entrepreneur, you're knocking on a lot of doors. You're testing assumptions that force you to pivot. Things don't work out. You need somebody to kind of fall back on, and that's one of the important things. So first, your personal culture. This is because both Steve and I have spent a lot of time overseas. We think about well beyond just our borders, but this is as true when you're even thinking domestically. You're thinking about age differences, geographic differences. There are subtleties that you bring to your customers. There's biases or or assumptions that you have that your customers may not share. And so understanding those and being able to tease those out is really helpful and really important. So this is actually a plug for a book by a friend of mine, Lana O'Connor. It came out a few years ago, and this is again in thinking about purposefully about culture, and it gives a pretty good framework, and it looks at kind of 8 different East versus West, kind of center, Midwest and South versus the coast, men versus women, the 1% versus the 99%, and it really kind of comes down to, and I use the East versus West versus the Midwest and South. The East and West is the West Coast, or East is independent. It's the Marlboro man, it's the lone person, and it's thinking about what's my personal brand. Versus interdependent, which is what's important to me are the relationships and how I impact those relationships. It's the individual versus the relational, unique. So again, my personal brand versus looking for similarities, influencing. So you think of a LinkedIn influencer versus being able to adjust and accommodate to what happens. Being free or being rooted, whether you're more likely to kind of be the first one to speak up or whether you're more likely to listen. Do you see differences or do you see similarities? It becomes helpful, and I use this is a kind of a East-West image where you think you see somebody on a crowded subway with a mask. Right? So if you're in the West and you ask, why is that person wearing a mask? Because they don't want to get sick. If you're in the East and you ask, why are they wearing a mask? It's because they are sick and they don't want to get anybody else sick. So this whole sense of being individual or about the relational is, and it's just a kind of a useful way to think of you as an individual as well as your kind of organizational role, and how and the book itself kind of talks, if you're one, how do you bridge to the other and take advantage of the other, not take advantage in a negative way, but benefit from the other. So this again, when I talk about your sense of self and knowing yourself, there are some things about yourself that you are so accustomed to that you're unaware of. And again, the journey of being an entrepreneur is revealing those for the strengths and the weaknesses, and being able to understand those things that you assume that other people don't assume, and those things that you that may be part and parcel of who you are, that are so deeply embedded that you're not aware of them, and bringing those to the surface and understanding how those can impede your entrepreneurial journey or benefit it. And then as you think about the growth of the company, how you ensure that you, if it's a weakness, that you have people carte blanche to have them call you on it, acknowledge that weakness, and kind of bolster you when necessary, instead of trying to hide it. So again, Steve and I grew up in a period where if you're bad at something, you always spend tons of time trying to get an incremental gain. I think that's a complete waste of time.
And now the new theory is it's pretty much been
just the opposite. Yeah. So I think of all the 1 year I spent on calculus, working my way up from a C- to a C+, complete waste of time. I wished I would have spent more time doing things that I was better at. Well, a purpose-driven organization has the benefit of being having kind of double draws to prospective employees, partners, investors, advisors. That is, that the mission itself draws people in. The challenge to that, though, is when the mission is an implicit discount to those participating. So I have seen some wonderful organizations with incredible missions that were also incredibly dysfunctional because there was this implicit understanding that because we're mission driven, we don't have to pay as well, or our facilities don't have to be as good. That somehow the mission substitutes for both the environment, management, and pay. And that's not really fair. Ultimately, I've seen those organizations with great missions, even great talent, but often implode because of that. So understanding that a mission can't substitute for the basics that people expect in management and in being paid for the work that they're doing. So that's a really important part, and it's doubly difficult. I like to say that being a mission-driven organization is a little bit like Ginger Rogers dancing with Fred Astaire. You have to do everything backwards in heels, and so it's an added challenge. And understanding that up front, you'll be able to draw additional talent. You'll be able to draw in great people to help advise the work that you're doing. But don't think that you can shortcut on the basic things that any organization and employees expect.
Again, the idea of knowing yourself and who you can be, there's an aspiration. So obviously, if you want to be a multi-billion-dollar business, you're going to be a different person, a different player when you're, running a business that size than running a startup. But it's knowing who you can be versus an aspirational you that's not really you. And a perfect example for me is, I actually had, this job that I fought to get. I spent tons of time trying to get it in Silicon Valley, but it was a bad fit. It was me seeing who I wanted to be, not the me I was, and it was a disaster.
You got the job.
I got the job, but it was wrong. It was wrong, It was, and that wasn't a good fit, and it was learning from failure. That was like real painful experience, and I couldn't really think about it for a while. It was like this sharp stone in my pocket that I couldn't even put my hand in the pocket to touch for a while. But over time, I came back to that experience. I learned so much about myself and from that failure. And I eventually, reached back out to my boss at the time, and we ended up doing some work together. But it was, there's a lot to learn in that, and there's a lot of for me. I was 24 at the time. A lot of it was learning about myself and that aspirational me versus the real me, and knowing where I could just really expand and where I had limits that I had to acknowledge, and so that was a huge learning experience, and it was painful, but